All right. I guess we are ready. We have got some mood lighting going on as well, which is nice. So let me introduce you guys to all of our panelists today. First of all, the design director here at GeekyAnts, Megha. Welcome. Please have a seat. Oh, Akash is already here. Hi again, Akash. I didn't see you there. Where do I look?
Keep that chair empty, by the way.
I think you brought your own chair. Great. I'd also like to introduce you guys to one of the core team members of at Razorpay, the design director, Arun. Is he? There he is. Hi Arun, welcome. Please have a seat.
Which chair is Akash's?
Akash has his own chair. We don't have to leave his chair for him. Should we, Akash? I mean, you won't mind, right?
No, that's fine.
Okay, great. And I would like to call on stage again Aditya, our speaker for the day. Come on in. I will just sit myself down in this corner. Oh, I've been waiting to sit for so long. Oh, I have questions. I have tons of questions. All right, so we're going to be talking about everything design today. And I think the best way for us to begin would be for me to ask you guys. Good, right? Okay. Akash, you can also hear me, right? Just confirming. Fantastic. So I'd like to ask all of you guys, and I think Akash, since you brought your own chair, you have that comfort. I'll ask you this first. How did your journey as a designer start, and what all things would you consider as milestones in your journey so far that brought you where you are at this point?
I started as a very stupid designer, honestly. I used to design in HTML and CSS. That was the design. There was no initial PhDs or Photoshop, whatever, anything like that. We used to directly do HTML, CSS, and do the changes. It was 2011-12, and that's how I started. And I think then graduating to and working with startups at very small stages helped me a lot. There was good mentors which helped me a lot, and I don't think I could learn anything on my own, at least in design. If I I owe to all the mentors who helped me. So you always learn designing and all these things from people around you and improve. And if I say milestone, my previous job, like at Athena Health, where we designed EHR for mobiles, that helped me a lot. That helped me how to talk to users, how to sell your designs, how to uh, negotiate, how to not compromise with your designs, and so much. So I think yeah, that was a milestone, and that gave me confidence basically to start up. So yeah.
Fantastic. Aditya, what about you?
Nice, you put me on spot right away.
Why not? You've already won your prize.
Sure.
I guess that's the least you owe me right now.
Sure. Yeah, my design journey was very similar to a lot of designers would be here. Like how you start with. What Akash did not mention, like designing with posters in colleges, right? That's how most people, I think, discover design. Where someone asks, "We want a poster for this event. Any of you who don't code can they help me out like this?"
And it can be as chaotic as you want.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, like that design, initially, I think you just go to FreePick and download a template and you're like, I designed this.
Right.
That's how it starts. But then you start to get a little creative. You're like, yeah, this is interesting. That's how it starts. So my journey was filled with a lot of hackathons which I attended in college, a ton of hackathons and a lot of internships, freelance. And I guess it was more of that. And milestone wise, joining my first full-time role as a designer was a big significant achievement. And then we reached a scale where we got to 1 million total users and then 2 million users. So those were really remarkable things to see, especially when you come from a freelance kind of a background where you're just giving the designers, giving the person their designs, taking the money and going away to a particular stage where you can see people using your design. That was a very significant milestone.
And I think being a freelancer, it also takes a lot of discipline in terms of growing yourself, because you don't have any external factors that would want you to grow or push you towards that growth. It's just you, your zeal,
Correct.
and you just push yourself. Say, okay, I want to be better. I want to
Exactly.
create better designs. I think
Absolutely.
that kind of enriches the entire experience, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it teaches you a lot. So initially, there's very little criticism, or even the criticism is highly specific to their own taste, because design is sometimes subjective.
Right.
But then you learn a lot of things. Then you learn which kind of criticisms to take, which not to take, and slowly you grow ahead.
Sure, sure. With a fantastic, fantastic story. Megha,
Yeah.
everything
My-
that we are doing here right now is us. So, what was it like for you?
So for me, it's kind of mixed for both of you. Like, yeah, I was UI developer before. I had some knowledge about design as well. Like, I was aware of Photoshop. So initially started with freelancing for UI development, like for taking the websites and all. But there I was putting my ideas as well, improving their designs, the designs what I was getting from client. I was doing some improvements in that. At least I was adding interactions there. So that was my good thing, I'll say. I was being, being appreciated by taking those extra things. And then I think, okay, I like this thing. I like this interaction thing a lot. And from there, it's moved on. Yes, I got
Here we
interest
are.
in designs as well. Yes, this is my milestone,
Yeah.
you say. So first milestone would be having this company, and then second would be having this entire team.
Yep.
Yes, this is
Yep.
what I-
Shout out to you guys. You're doing an excellent job.
Yes.
Arun, design at Razorpay. Everybody talks about it.
Right.
Do they?
Everybody talks
Yeah.
about it. Heck, I am not a designer. I talk about it.
Good to hear it.
What's the story?
I was connecting to what these folks have also mentioned. Mine's equally funny, if not more. So that's a professional photographer, and growing up, it was just natural for us to just tinker with everything that had technology in it, right? So started with that, but then when I went to Roorkee, I met the co-founders of Razorpay, Harshal and Shashank, they're seniors of mine, and we had an idea to do something for the campus. Can we build a few digital products for the campus to make students and everyone's life kind of better? So I started doing what I knew, thanks to that.
Tinker.
Exactly. Right. So I just started putting my finger wherever I was not allowed to, and that's how it started for me. That's one of the biggest milestones, I'd say. And most of you would not know. I was so naive. I still am. That till the end, I didn't know that this is a profession and you get paid for this.
Okay.
So sounds a little funny, but I'm a biotech graduate. I almost had my tickets booked to Georgia so that I can just go do my master's in genetic engineering. Bunch of juniors from college have interned at a few startups back then. They've come back to me and they've discussed how much you earn as a designer. It's like, oh, why am I even doing this genetic engineering?
Aren't you glad you get those
Exactly.
tickets now?
I get nightmares thinking about it. Right? I'm
Like,
glad I
oh
didn't
God,
do
I
that.
want to fly to Georgia. I don't want to be here.
Right? I would have been on a home loan, student loan and whatnot and whatnot. So thank God for these juniors who've opened up my eyes that this is not just a hobby. You do get paid in this, and some good money as well.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. so once I guess Akash is trying to say something. Yeah. So once
After
Harshal,
you.
once Harshal and Shashank started off with Razorpay, it was just natural for me and a bunch of folks who've done some similar stuff at campus. Just join them. And post that, every single milestone that I had was again related to pretty much Razorpay. And it's also so funny that the moment you're asking these questions, I had no answer. I have no clue the shortcuts on Figma. I have no clue what the double diamond processes are. I have none. What I did, I think I'm very proud of it. What I did is I just, whenever I didn't know things, I just hired the right people for it.
That's a skill in itself, right?
I'd shake your hand, but I guess I'll just lead the way. So I'll do that later just for that. Well, since we're talking about, coming from all these different backgrounds, just getting into these things and tinkering with different things, putting your feet into different waters and just figuring out how it is. And it's also a question that I usually keep thinking about. Haven't had the gall to ask a designer because I did not know what kind of reception I'd receive. But now that we have this stage and I have this stage where I'm very safe, I'm going to ask this question. I've seen designers work, right? And I see that there's just this innate ability to understand whether something looks right or not. So is that a skill that you can train, or is it really innate? I mean, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do you have to be artistic in order to be a designer, or how much percentage of would you credit it to creativity, the skills that you have as a designer? So, what would you guys have to say about that? Anybody could go.
I'll take a stab.
All right.
Also, when you say creativity, I am thinking you're not just asking about the visual, just the look and feel of it. You're in general, talking about, can we solve a particular problem with design in a creative way? Right? So, if I were to take this particular statement, the answer is a definite yes.
Okay.
Right? Where and it's the same for everywhere, right? Like even for product managers, I'm guessing it's not a textbook principle that you follow as step 1, step 2, step 3, and then you're done. You have a product out there already, right? You have to be creative enough to understand. Fair enough. This is a particular problem that is being faced by my customers, and how can I solve it in the best way possible with all the resources that I have currently? Right? So keeping this in mind, definitely creativity is one of the most important factors. And the answer to, can you teach this to someone? I am not sure, primarily because I've had my fair share of troubles with a few folks who were very difficult to kind of work with. I've also had a lot of good time working with some folks who've kind of picked up things super fast. Right? And if we were talking only about the visual aspect of design, should we be artistic or not? Recently, with the industry kind of pushing the bar on visual quality. Again, the answer is not textbook over here. It can't just be that, your product should just look absolutely beautiful for you to kind of earn that revenue. And neither can I say that it's completely fine. You can just chuck it out of the park, just do a functional thing and then you're done with it, right? It all depends on what's your product, what's your brand like, and how your customers are. In fact, to take an example, not sure how many of you have seen the products, that are being developed in the Southeast Asian countries, right? Over there, minimalism, clean look and feel doesn't work at all. The moment you provide a very clean looking interface to these users in Southeast Asia, they'll be like, there's nothing in this.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you do not provide anything.
They want dialog bubbles, huge colors.
They
bright
want
colors.
everything on their face
Super
in that
zoom.
one screen. Right? So, but is that beautiful or not? Is that working or not? Again, I can't
Very
just
subjective.
Exactly, it's a very subjective.
Right. Akash, what would you say? Is it trainable, or do you need to be born with it?
I think you train your eyes over the period of time, right? We always look at different apps, different websites, different products, and that's how you train your eyes. Many of the designers must have faced this question in the interviews, that what are your top 3 apps which you like, right? The question, or the expected answer is like, how basically, what are your sources of inspiration and references? That tells your taste in design, that tells how you have developed that eye of that creativity. Also, I think more than creativity, it's a lot of about creative thinking. The one very most important, or like, example which I always use is, Paytm had uh, one problem in the initial days. After the successful payment, they used to say, show the checkbox that payment is done. What people used to do is take the screenshot and show the chai wala every time the same screenshot, that I have paid, I have paid. How are you going to solve that problem? A simple solution was show the animated tick, right? It was a very simple solution. Show the timestamp, show an animated checkbox, and the problems get solved. It's a huge problem, but it is solved very creatively with design. And I think this is kind of a thinking is there, then I think you're good.
Right, right. Megha, since you've been working with so many people, so many different designers, what are your observations?
Um, being creative is actually one of the part that designer has to be there. Design needs to have but it's not the only thing, obviously, because creativity is one thing that makes the things beautiful, but there's another aspect, make the things usable. Right? Usability is also there, so it should always be the balance. You have to have, but it can be trained. Yes, that's what I have seen, that's what I have feel. If you have eye to detailing, if you have this understanding of the problem, understanding about the user who is going to use it, and then mix of all these things can brought up this creativity, because you take some references, you take some inputs from your daily use apps and all, so that can be trained as well. But yes, you should always have this interest, so interest matters a lot.
Right. Well,
But yes.
it's funny because for me personally, creativity was very subjected to till I started working with designers personally. For me, creativity was very subjected to picking the right color or having the right color combinations. And I'm horrible, I'm colorblind, so that was something that I absolutely struggled with. If you guys come up to me and ask me what color t-shirt I'm wearing, I'm just going to walk out and you'll never see me again. So for me, creativity was very, very restricted in terms of these simple things that okay, you know if an element is placed in the center of a screen or not. If it's not, you have the eye to know that it's deviated, or if you know what the colors go with what, or what colors are warm, what colors are nice, what colors are not. So I was very, very restricted by this. But when I started working closely with designers, I understood that creativity innately is a lot more. There's so many different factors, so many dimensions to it. So, Aditya, since you started out as a freelancer, did you also follow the same suite, or did you already have a certain idea, or what was this like for you? I mean, in terms of having a sense of creativity, or did you even consider yourself creative at all when you first started out?
Yeah, yeah. I think majority of all the points which I had have been covered wonderfully. But one thing I see, it's a common occurrence, is it? For example, we had the talk from Akash and how Arun was saying that his father is a photographer, and I also have a knack for photography, right? So one thing that I've noticed is with designers, even if it's not directly something as close to as sketching, which we often associate it to, they are like somewhat creative in a different way. Someone's interested in a dance form, someone really has an ear for music, so you would find the creative factor originating from some or the other source. But apart from that, I'd seen that the two aspects, right, which we all talked about, the visual side of it and the analytical side of it, like having the eye for seeing if something is slightly off. That I think something, it's very good if there's that thing is present in a designer, but with more and more tools coming in, like especially things like auto layout, right? These things can be automated. They don't need to be there anymore. And even like things like if that color is one shade off, for example, my own flatmate, he's a designer and he is also colorblind. And he doesn't tell this to a lot of people, and it might come as a surprise, right? How can a designer be colorblind, right?
I can be a designer too.
Exactly, right?
Wow.
So
Okay.
all these tools,
So I
like
wasn't wrong.
the tokens that Tanisha was talking about, the design tokens, etc. These kind of things get solved nowadays. So like all your design systems have the color. You don't have to really look for it until a few particular things. So I would say the taste part which Akash talked about, that is something which I would say still comes from within a lot. So it's rather helpful if you have a very tasteful person. Now, taste doesn't necessarily need to mean that it has to be a very sleek looking object or anything very lavish, or it can be just simplicity or minimalism, like Arun was talking about. But the visual aspect or how things should be aligned, the basic principles of grouping, I think that part can definitely be taught.
Okay. And that is why these automations are coming
Exactly.
in, because they're trainable.
Exactly.
So
Those are
why train men when you can train machines?
exactly.
Right.
And I think, designer used to have this one instinct, like they have this capacity. That's why they change their role. I mean, many people, I've seen a lot of designers, like more than 50-60% designers are from different, they started their journey from different segment, but they turned out to the designer because they realized, like, okay, this is what I meant for. So yes,
But then,
creativity
do you
was
think
there.
right? But do you think, since you're talking about automation and you're talking about trainable, these little things that are trainable, do you think automating all of these and leaving them to machines? Let's talk about design systems. Do not quote me, please, for what I'm about to say. But do you think it's going to hamper the abilities of future designers that are coming in?
I was in fact thinking about that. In fact, when this was presented that everything is automatically defined and now you have tokens and you just need to remember a particular token number or whatever that you need to include in your design. So like, yeah, fair enough. This particular shadow is already defined. It's some 300 or 400. Right? Fair, it does. I wouldn't say that it hampers, let's say, a growth of a designer, but I would definitely see it as maybe it won't let you challenge the status quo often, right? Maybe you might not challenge the look and feel of it as often as you would have, let's say, if these were not defined. But again, neither can I say that let's just not have all of them and then just hamper our productivity either. Right? So over there, I'd like to go back to design leaders and design managers and saying that you figure out when and at what particular point do you need to push the boundary a little, right? Ask for a little more from the designer, right? Challenge, ask the right questions a little more often, and where it absolutely makes sense, and not just be happy with what they provide. Right? So it's a very gray zone, right? Like, we can't just say yes, it definitely affects neither, just completely scrap it off. It has its pros and cons. As long as designers are able to challenge things, come back with a lot more visual directions and creative solutions and give me I sometimes think that every one of us should often think, what if we give the best experience possible for our customers, right? And if there is some answer that you can pursue, why not?
Sure. Sure. So, talking about this, obviously, it's your own perspective where you say that, okay, well, it doesn't really help or it doesn't really hamper at all, but it's somewhere a person needs to make a decision where they want to push the boundaries or not. Which brings me to my next question. So, when you talk about this mentality, when you talk about this mindset that you need, and when you try to establish this mindset within a team, say a team of 10 people, 15 people that you are now leading, how do you do that? How do you convey ideas? Or, I guess what I'm trying to say in the rawest form is, how do you manage collaboration between teams of people who are so versatile, who look at the same thing from different perspectives, right? It's bound to bring up some sort of clash or something of that sort. So how do you guys manage those teams? I don't know if you'd like to take that.
It's a super interesting question, especially I'm not sure how many of you, had the opportunity to set up a team and work with a particular team, right? Because on one hand, you need to manage what kind of talent are you bringing into the team. How close are they to your current team and how different are they to your current team? There should be a right balance for that, right? I can't just have every single person who likes the same kind of quality and has the exact same design, because I'll be stuck with them, right? The same quality will just come. I'm not saying that the quality is bad, but nobody will challenge anything for me for, let's say, years to come, right? But at the same time, if I have everyone chaotic on the team, I'll probably be stuck with people who are just questioning every single thing at every single point in time. Because in the world of building great startups and great products, someone at some place and at some time has to disagree and commit.
Right.
You would,
right.
I see you laughing a lot more on that, right? And that's where we as creative people, not just designers, even marketeers, content writers, people who are a lot more creative, a lot more subjectivity where it comes into the picture, we do not know where to draw a boundary, right? So you need to have a mix of both, like a person who can easily identify that this is something where I'll go with the status quo. I'm not going to challenge anything. I'll use the existing design system. I'll use the existing industry standards UX over here. Everyone's using a radio button over here. I'm going to blindly use that over here, right? But you also need them to come back to you and challenge that. Fair, why should we use a radio button over here? Can we think of something else? Right. And if you're able to take that call, keeping in mind again the same resources that we talked about on time, bandwidth of your people, how valid is the problem statement, not because a lot of times I do see people putting tons of effort into something that was never validated, shooting in the dark. Right? You would put some 6 months of time and then the product dies the second day it goes live. Right? And on the other hand, we do see the other side also, where you're very clear on the problem statement, where you have to put a lot of effort to solve it in the right way, but you go in the mentality of let's fail fast and you just fall face down. Right? Where people were actually expecting great quality from you, you just did something that is very textbook norm up there, and then your product never scaled up. Right? So you need to balance that in your team where you have all the right kind of skills in the team and they're leveling up when it comes to these skills. And this is where over communication kind of helps,
Hmm.
right? This is where I always say that don't communicate, over communicate every little thing. And this is something that you've mentioned in your earlier question also, that designers have this innate ability to come to the right answers, but most of the times when you put them at the spot, they're not able to answer.
Right.
So document it. Right? So at Razorpay, we follow this practice where just like a product manager gives you a product spec, I want every designer to write a design spec. Whatever calls that you're taking, write it down for me. Whatever assumptions you're taking, write it down for me, and do mention how you're going to test it at a later stage. Right? This not just helps you in keeping a documentation out of it, keeping a log out of it, so that you know these answers, but also, in a future date when you come back to that, you know exactly what you've done and what you've gone through and how you've played that.
I think also helps in this sort of establishing a justification behind why
Exactly.
everybody thinks how they think.
Yeah.
And helps you understand, okay, well, if we have 5 different options and if everybody is rooting for it according to the vision of the product that we're trying to build, what fits the best, and then I think that
Exactly.
justification can bring everybody on the same page.
Exactly. It just acts as a source of truth for you.
Right.
So and that has been absolutely helpful at least.
Akash, how's it been at Athena Health for you?
I think, as Arun mentioned, diversity in thoughts is really important when you are in a team. That gonna challenge a lot of things which you are building or designing. If there is no one who gonna question you, then you are in a wrong team, I think. And if that is not happening, then there is something serious wrong with the dynamics of your team. So I think, and also I was trained as like asking questions a lot. If you are not asking questions, that means you are not putting that much of efforts into what you are trying to solve, because you don't have that much of data. And definitely, whatever the solution which you will come up with, that will be based on assumptions and not the reality which is out there. So, and that's why I always feel that there should be people around you who are gonna question everything which you do. Doesn't matter at what position they are sitting, and if that is happening with you, then you are in a very good team and you're gonna grow a lot. And as a designer, you always should be you always have that uh, acceptance of that somebody gonna challenge your design, and with training and time you understand how to answer those questions. And I think, yeah, that helps a lot when you grow. Even if you are a junior designer, your managers or the senior people will ask you questions. When you are a senior or managing design manager, the juniors gonna ask you questions like why we are doing this, why this feature, why this design decision. And then as a designer, we should be articulate our answers in a very much better and crisp way. I think that's the biggest skill designers should have.
Right. Aditya, your
Yeah.
views?
Sure, I think like the same two wonderful people who've spoken, I think their views are very coherent. And just about asking questions, on that note, I've realized that sometimes you have to also ask people to ask questions, because it doesn't come to a lot of people innately. Especially in my team, like someone, especially this is a problem when you're, in a remote environment. Like a lot of people have this tendency to go on mute. And while you're communicating, they probably would be saying something, but they don't even realize that they're on mute. So you have to nudge them slightly that, hey, what do you think about this? Even though if you are fairly certain you've gotten everybody on board, you need to make sure that they are questioning it as well. So that's something I think which is the same thing which I was trying to tell in my talk as well, that you need to encourage designers to ask more questions, even if they seem extremely stupid, even if they seem like you are kind of questioning your PM's ideas, even if it seems like you're pushing them to the edge. Ask them and make sure that you are on the same level as they are as well. And in the same way, like I think was Arun was mentioning, the idea about making sure that you document all your design decisions. Along with it, something which I was speaking about earlier was also like, especially in smaller teams, the context of the problems also keeps changing. Like while solving the problem, you realize that, well, while solving this way, we might also solve another problem that we've been having for a while. So it also makes sense to make sure that the changing context is also logged, so that you don't miss the things which are there in the middle. So mainly, I think over communication is a great example. making sure that you do as much talk as you can asynchronously as well. Maybe someone's not right there to read all maybe speak what you were listening to. But if you can just write up that extra piece of justification on a Slack thread, if you can just record a Loom video explaining your designs, as simple as that, it just helps so much to maintain the context.
But then again, obviously, over communicating, as you made a very good point, is very important, and encouraging people to ask questions or just at least speak what's on their mind is also extremely important. But I think this question comes from more of a management perspective rather than being a designer and all of that. And I think this is the right place to ask this as well. So when you're encouraging people to speak their mind, where and how do you realize that, okay, well, now I'm being pushy, right? So how do you guys understand that?
You mean pushy in the sense, like from a managerial perspective?
From a, perhaps a managerial perspective, say for example, you find yourself in a situation where you're like, okay, I want to know what you think, but I just get no answers, and I'm like, well, I'd like to hear what you say, and then the person would be like, okay, stop asking me questions, I don't have anything to say, you know. So how do you get to that point, and how do you understand that, okay, well, this is the line that I do not need to step over?
Oh, for me, I think this answer might upset a lot of people. I don't think that line should exist. Right? Let me just quickly ask a question. Right? Given an option to sit in a silo and design something great for the next 2 hours versus sitting in a room with a bunch of product managers, fighting with them and then designing something along with them, what would you pick? How many of you would pick A, design in a silo, sitting somewhere, aram say listening to your own music, having all the problems listed down, sketching some things? Don't lie.
I think it's a lot of people just not raising their hands.
Yeah,
encourage them.
Sometimes
Raise your hands.
Please do. Nothing wrong in that. Nothing wrong in that. Please do. I am one of them, by the way. You know, give me a room. I'm gonna, go sit silently, design something great, and come back. But I'm guessing the others would have raised a hand. Where you would sit, fight with a PM or an engineer, and then come back. Don't lie. Fair, right? So, which designer would I pick? I would pick the second one. Keeping that in mind, I would say that there's no line where you're crossing someone. I don't think there's any line here to cross in putting someone at a spot and then just asking their opinions about something. Right? As far as you're not asking something that is absolutely ridiculous,
Sure.
By the end of the day, you're building something great for your consumer.
Right.
You might come with your own thoughts. I am coming with my own.
Right.
Nothing wrong in putting them on a paper or just.
Megha, how's it been for you working with so many
I
different
think
people?
they have already explained the same thing. So it's all about like communication. Just keep communicating. Throw your ideas. That's why we have this whiteboard. Okay,
Right.
dump your ideas there. Write whatever you can think of, and then pick each of the items, discuss, and find out the solution. Write it down. Narrow it down. Let's say. Then only the solution comes in. The problem statement comes from everywhere. Diversity is what we have already discussed. So that's how it actually collaborates. Yes, obviously in this hybrid model, remote culture, we were finding it little difficult, but we tried to manage it very well. I think with Figma file itself, we were discussing over there, and we were trying to find out the solution on that itself. So this is the way, but you have to encourage people as well to talk, because someone is junior, the one who is starting it, they might feel like, okay, my ideas, I don't know how people will react on this. They'll say how I'm stupid about whatever question I'm asking and all. I was that kind of person. I was that, but later I got to know, nay, this is not the way you should do your work. You should throw your ideas. First of all, it doesn't matter how small or how big it is. Just talk, and you will find the solution. And in our design review call as well, we identify, okay, just we are demonstrating whatever we have done after the discussion as well. Whatever we have done, there are some loopholes that we can improve more. So yes, again, the talk and collaboration things, that's very important.
Well, I think the important point to take away from this one particular discussion is that if you do have any kind of ideas as a designer, be it as stupid as it may, there's somebody out there who's going to hear it out and probably do something about it. So never think that any of the ideas that you have is too subpar or too stupid, right? Because that is how greatness is built. And this also gives me the encouragement and the confidence, because I have a lot of stupid ideas about our website.
Yes.
I've already been laughed at, but I'm still going to throw them out there.
So we always fight for that.
We always fight about it, right? So I think we know what we're talking about.
Just a quick thing on that, like since you were saying that how do you not cross the line, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes let's say that if you want to take someone's opinion and you don't want to make it very binary, so
Right.
better idea is to give them a prompt. To like, what do you not, instead of saying what do you think about this, just tell them the idea itself and ask them what is the opinion about the idea, so that they have a little more context to think on. So some people are like they can think instantly really well, but some people need a bit of help.
Right.
So give them that extra prompt, help them out in the thinking process, and that often turns out very helpful.
It's actually a very good point. There's something that I personally felt as well, that there are some people, a very small percentage, who are very quick with their thinking and come up with great ideas, understand what they need to do right away. But then some people need to sit on it for some time.
Exactly.
I think it's very important for us to give them that space. Fantastic point. Right. So towards the last leg of the discussion that we are having today, we are going to be talking about some of the difficult things. I hope you're ready for that. And the most difficult thing for a designer, in my opinion, is handling criticism.
Exactly.
Right. So, Megha, I'll start with you this time. As a designer, let's not talk about you as a team lead. Let's not talk about you as a director. Let's talk about you as a designer. How do you handle criticism?
Toughest task, obviously. I mean, instead of if you have done something, instead of getting appreciation, you are getting criticism. So that always put you down. But what I learned is, like, you should not take the criticism personally. That's one thing. Second, like, you should need to understand why it is coming. Okay, what exactly they are trying to point out. I mean, no one can come and say like, I didn't like your design. Okay. They must say like what exactly you didn't like, okay? Or what is your perspective. So try to understand what they are coming from and what they are thinking, what they want to put in here. So make those pointers for your improvements, but also whatever design you have created, you must have some thinking behind it. You must have done your research before you put that on the screen. So I mean, you should also offend it a bit. Like, okay, TK, this is what my problem statement, and this is how I am thinking. That's the solution I reached to based on my these research. So that's the documentation part, what we have already talked about. That is very essential at that time. Explaining this to justification, yes, justification you have to give. But yes, as again, idea comes from anywhere. So even in the criticism, you can get this. So take it positively. Obviously, that's what I can say.
Right.
But don't I mean, demotivate. I mean, it's not about someone is asking. I mean, someone is complaining about your design thing or something. It's just about their thought. You should take this down, validate it, whether it is essential to take this in your design, or then only take. I mean, it should be your call. And as a designer, it should be your call, like whether you are taking this criticism to a conversion of the design, or you are just ignoring it based on your research again.
Right. So research is important. Justification
Is
reasons,
important.
valid reasons behind taking a decision is important. You started out as a freelancer, right?
Yeah.
And you were your own man, you were your own team, and you did everything on your own, and then you transitioned into being in a team, and then handling a team, and then managing so much. How did your mindset change in terms of taking criticism? Because I'm sure that when you're working as a freelancer, you start out, there's not much feedback that's coming in, and then once you start in a team, there's suddenly a lot of feedback channels that open up.
Exactly.
So how has your journey been, and how did you manage all of that?
Sure. So I'd like to preface this with one of my favorite movies and a line from that. So my favorite movie is Fight Club. There's a line in that movie which says, "You are not your job." In the same way, I think it's very important for every designer to realize that you are not your designs. You need to separate yourself from your work. And this is a very generalist advice that you can apply to other things as well. So especially like since you brought up the freelance point, point about freelance is that mostly you're just talking to the founder or whoever you're driving the project with. Whereas once you start working in an actual team where the product goes through multiple iterations, you get to hear from the customers. And a team would give you both the perspectives. You'd hear feedback from your product managers and then from the customers. And that won't be the direct way, of course. They wouldn't tell you what's wrong. They will just not be able to do the same actions which you've defined. So one thing which is extremely helpful is to instead let that feedback come through customers. Now, of course, that's a longer feedback loop. It's slightly difficult to close because you need to push those designs out and then get that feedback. But again, the same idea applies that if you've designed something, it is, of course, something you do with a lot of heart and soul. So it's an extension of your personality. But at least it's very important to analyze and understand that that's not the end. That's not you. That's just something you've made, and you can, of course, do better. Everybody can do better all the time. That's all in design, right? We don't define efficiency like we do with code. There's no time complexity or space complexity. So those are a few things which have worked in my favor, basically, to somehow let the feedback come through customers instead of just one person. And a lot of times separate myself from my work. I think that's also an ideology which works very well in the West. Here we are very, very obsessed with our jobs. We almost introduce ourselves as, hey, I am A and I work at B. Whereas if you go outside, they just treat their job as a small part of their lives. So I think that's something we are learning together as a community. But yeah, that's okay.
Right. Good points there. Obviously, culture has a part to play in it, but I think the fact of the matter was that at a point where it's also important to understand what kind of feedback you're getting here. I mean, you cannot just open yourself to all kinds of noise that's out there, right? And I think it's a person's ability to understand certain situations where they understand what is constructive and what is not. I think that's also something that needs there's a very fine division between it, but I think that's also something that people need to learn to identify. Akash, running a team, doing everything from a criticism standpoint, how do you handle all of these things, and how does the team react to moments where there's a lot of constructive feedback that's coming in and a lot of changes have to happen? I'd love to know.
I think involve your team at the very, very initial stage of your design process helps a lot. That way, you basically designing collectively and everyone is involved in that design process helps a lot because then that criticism is not binary. Whether they maza nahi aaya wala feedback won't come at all because they know how the process happened, what are those assumptions which we had, what are those data points, which user gave us this feedback, why they give feedback, and if we, as Arun said, over communicating with them that why we are doing this and why it is designed this way. If we communicate that and if we involve them, then I don't think there will be a criticism at all. There will be a good feedback coming in. From your stakeholders and your team.
Right. Arun, your views on this entire thing?
I think I've learned it the hard way to get my popcorn to all these meetings.
Okay.
Jokes aside, see, the thing that irks most of the designers is again what panel has already spoke about, right? I've put so much effort into something. How can someone just raise a finger at this particular thing? But I'd again go back to, while there's a lot of values on culture that I can talk about, I just want to talk about, how should designers treat feedback, right? I'm not calling it criticism. I'm consciously not calling it criticism. Instead of giving all the gyan about, how should you take it, how should you not take it, and all of it, let's just discuss, what generally happens out there, right? So first of all, there are two levels of feedback. One is something that you should definitely take. One is something that you should just forget. Like, this doesn't make sense, right? So the first thing that you need to know is identify what to take and what not to take. Now, in the ones that you need to take, there are again two levels, which unfortunately for design being subjective, there's subjective feedback and then there's objective feedback. Right? Objective feedback goes something like this, right? I don't think I can open, my users might not be able to open this bottle cap because of the way it is structured. Right? That's an objective feedback. Right? I don't think this bottle looks beautiful yet. That's a subjective feedback. Right? So you need to know how to tackle both. Right? Subjective feedback is where no amount of justification might work. Right? If someone like me enters the room, I'll be the loudest. I'll just prove my point. I'll go back. You might not win. Right? Or on the other hand, I might just learn about something new and then I'll go back. Right? You can't just promise this situation when it comes to this subjective feedback. Subjective feedback is where your brand, your voice and tone, your visual styles, your palettes, and all of these kind of come into the picture. But again, I can't just say that we've always been, this shade of blue. Why not just use this shade of blue? That's a stupid argument, right? Like it doesn't prove anything. It's still subjective by the end of the day. So over there, someone has to disagree. Who's disagreeing depends on who's kind of dealing that situation, right? Objective feedback is where we should ace, and a lot of times we do not, because we consider that as subjective feedback also. Right? Oh, you're not able to open this bottle cap. I think you're stupid.
Maybe you're doing it.
Maybe you're doing it wrong. Our users, you should try it harder, right? Maybe we should talk to the industrial designer and see, what they think. The moment you do not treat your objective feedback as objective feedback, you're going wrong. How do you deal it is something that, Aditya has kind of mentioned in a very clear way, where you do not shoot the messenger. Shoot the message. Right? Put it down on a piece of paper and fight if that's actually making sense, rather than seeing where is it coming from. Right? And in all of this, again, going back, over communication absolutely helps.
Right. I mean, obviously, that makes a lot of sense. But then if you go on the flip side of the coin, right, understanding subjective and objective. And by the way, you've made this very objective. I have to give you that. Put it very, very well. But if you look at the flip side of the coin, you look at it from a designer's perspective in terms of, well, say somebody who's found themselves in a position where they're sure of the fact that this is going to work, and then you get into that mode where you want to defend what you've done in front of people, right? So considering all of these different feedback that they are being subjected to, when do you think it's right for a designer to stand up and defend what they have done, instead of again, being very open towards feedback, subjective, objective feedback, versus being closed, and then there's that middle point where you know that you've done something right and you want to defend it. So what's that boundary like?
Well, if you're absolutely sure that whatever that you're suggesting is going to help increase something for the business, right? So this is something I've been trying to figure out. I don't have a concrete answer yet as to how do I measure subjective design also. Right? While on the objective side, you do have a lot of metrics around, what's the conversion like, what's the drop-offs like, etc. What is the lifetime value of my customer just because I'm doing something a little more subjective? Just maybe, giving a couple of extra weeks for my final visual touches, or, that fancy animation or whatever, right? If one day I figure it out, I want to publish something on that. But yeah, so as long as you're very sure that whatever that I'm suggesting right now makes sense to build it in the right time using all the resources that I have, it's going to impact my OKR in the right way, I'd say designers should do it, right? And this is another competency that we do test at Razorpay, where in most of the interviews you would see me giving some very wrong design feedback just to see if you're able to come to me or not, right? Because you will find a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders who do not understand design but have a lot of opinions, right? Same goes for marketing also. I'll go back and say that the way that you're launching the iPhone is absolutely pathetic. I might not know anything about go-to-market strategies, but it's visible, I'll go do that, right? I'll never go to an engineer and say that I think you should use a different function over here. I'll never do that. I don't think engineering managers do that either, right? Because you do not see that in function. There's nothing to kind of look and feel and then give a feedback on that, right? So in all of this, while taking feedback is one thing that everyone should learn, training others to give you the feedback in the right way is also something that everyone should learn.
That's a very good point. Right. Megha, what would you say about this? Defending design.
Defending the design.
Yes.
Yes, I think I've already spoken about it.
Yeah.
So yes, sometimes it requires to defend our design, because we have done, we have some evidence, we have researched about it, so we know that this doesn't work, so we won't include it. And if someone is asking to include it just because they want it, it doesn't make sense, right? We have this evidence like, okay, the user doesn't like this, and they have this feedback on the app stores, wherever you can get. So just show them, just let them know, like, this is my research and this is how I reached to this point. So again, conveying your opinion to someone is not a bad thing. It's always a good thing to say if you have the solid reason. if you have the solid justification.
But also it depends on
etc.
how you say it.
But yes, it should
You don't
always
just put the
be.
stick down and you
Obviously
say,
we
no,
have
you're
different-
wrong, I'm right, go with this, or I
and,
walk out.
Or maza nahi aaya.
this is
Maza nahi aaya, right.
The age
First
old.
thing actually should not be there. Definitely, man.
Right.
So that, so I mean, anybody should learn. Like, okay, this is not the way to give a feedback to anyone. Right. That's the thing. Maybe another thing could be when we have this design, even though we are defending it, we should listen to the other perspective as well. Maybe somewhere somehow we are missing it out some point. So obviously, as a designer, we have to keep our ears, eyes open every time. We have to grab, everything, whatever is coming to us. So that used to be helpful always. So that requires, you need to make a point. But yes, if you are, if you are presenting your design to a stakeholder or say whoever you are presenting, you should explain it in a way that, okay, this is my problem statement, this is the problem statement I have taken, and based on these data and this evidence, I am thinking this is the proposed solution that I believe it's going to work. So in that way, if you're presenting it, maybe it is more meaningful for them, so they can understand, they can relate it.
So
that's the thing.
the designer can just cut the call if the other person, the manager says ki maza nahi aaya, even after you give all the evidence.
Obviously, you
It's
can.
fair that
It's
to do
fair.
Maza nahi aaya is something that I absolutely love these days. I think in my entire experience, I've gone from a very non-confrontational person to लड़ाई कहाँ चल रहा है? वो जानना because it's so fascinating that when people say मजा नहीं आया, and when you kind of dig deeper, you understand something about
क्यों नहीं आया?
क्यों नहीं आया? बता ना क्या चाहिए?
Right.
This recently, I was.
Even I used to do this sometime. I mean, my designers, please forgive me if I do something wrong. I mean, I get some designs, okay, maybe a poster design or something. If I don't like it much, then I try to say, can we try something else?
Right.
So this is the way to convey you.
Right. I can't exactly put my finger on it, but maza nahi aaya.
I love that feedback. I absolutely love that.
You were saying something.
Yeah, I mean, recently we were designing a screen where the user, we were just revamping the screen where you enter your name as a user. And the screens before that were extremely colorful because we hired a new illustrator and they were making really nice illustrations. And on that screen, there's literally nothing else. There's just an input box and saying, hey, we'd love to know you more. So the PM goes, ki yaar, is screen mein na, and I knew he was going to say that maza nahi aaya. I'm like, ha. I know what you mean. We are working on it. But technically, usme utna maza aana bhi nahi chahiye. It's just they're entering the name. Sometimes you have to just go on that. And about that point which you're saying, that how do you defend your designs? I think that is something also which comes more with time. I think I don't generalize here, but in my experience, mostly what I've noticed, designers are somewhat shy. They are those people who would like sit in the corner quietly and they'll be like, "Dekho, mujhe requirement bata do, I'll just give you the designs. I'll make a really nice design and give you." And nobody likes to, I mean, as much as we saw people not raising hands, nobody actually likes to have that argument, right? But that you sometimes over the years and years you sort of learn. Even when I had joined the team initially, they would just tell me, "Ki yaar, Aditya button badal do," and I'll be like, "Theek hai, badal do." I'm like, okay.
Is that really how it is?
Yeah.
Designers in the house.
I mean, I can
That happens all
relate
the
it.
time.
It happens.
So
When you're starting, this is how it works.
and then somewhat of things which can help is like if you can make some of that subjectivity into objective things. For example, if you're talking about colors, you can actually tell them that this particular shade of color that I have, if the text I'm putting on that color meets a certain WCG standard, which will mean that it will be more accessible, then they will know that he has brought in a number, which means that he's trying to say something that the user will find it accessible. Or if like I'm making a button so small that it's beyond the touch area of the user, they will not be able to type it despite it being there. Right. So make as much of that subjectivity into objectivity when possible. That is somewhat helpful. And then I would just say advocate for your designs, advocate for your designers. If you are the one who is a little more vocal in your team and you know that some of your teammates are not as vocal, teach them and also advocate for them. That usually is very good practice.
Very fine line between advocacy and defiance.
Uh-huh.
I think we need to put that out there.
Absolutely.
Akash, how's your experience been with these things?
I think I take feedback when I start my presentation with, I think this looks good or I think this will work. instead of I know this will work. So that I know in my mind that whatever I have designed is based on my assumptions or based on the data, or I have confidence on that, and that helps a lot for me to take the feedback and to ask more questions. So whenever someone comes with the feedback, uh, the way I defend is I ask questions like, okay, you think so, but why do you think so? What on what basis, or what is your assumptions? Did you talk to any user about this who have mentioned about this problem? Uh, if they are coming with all the answers, then you don't know much, right? As a designer, then you take that feedback and you try to implement those things. I think being open at a certain thing for the feedback is really important. Also, it is very important to uh, say no, or to defend your designs when you really know, when you have done your research. And also, as a designer, your track record matters. Like, at how many times you said that this is going to work and that worked, right? Then you get that seat on the table, that if Aditya is saying that this is going to work, that means this will work, because he has that track record, he have that uh, way of working. So I think all these factors matters a lot while defending your designs, or advocating for your designs and your team. And also culture, like as people mentioned, that it is also very important that people should understand that this is their expertise, and they should understand where their expertise begin, and at what level they should be giving the feedback. So yeah.
So, based on historical evidence, should also be a factor. That's
Yes.
what you're saying.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
That's the unfortunate case. In a very utopian scenario, that should not exist, but humans, by the end of the day, you do judge on, अरे एक टाइम उसने ये बोला था वो तो काम ही नहीं किया.
Right.
That's the case, unfortunately.
Well, great. At this point, we still have like 5 more minutes, so I'd like to open the panel to all of you guys. I know I'm going against the grain here, but this is a space where you can talk about things that you want to talk about. These guys ask your questions. The entire panel is open now. So if anybody has anything that they'd like to ask, go for it. Yes.
Yeah, so one more thing I think, apart from criticism, is when designers get overwhelmed, right, by the other designers, the entire community. There's a lot of stuff out there on LinkedIn. So how do you deal with the overwhelming part?
First step, stop using LinkedIn.
Not LinkedIn, I'm sorry. Not LinkedIn.
Please go ahead. Yeah. So how do you stop yourself from overwhelm?
Not stop, I think it's good to get overwhelmed at times, because you level up by looking at the community, but sometimes it gets too much, right? So how do you deal with that part?
I think what he's trying to ask is, if you are just subjected to so many things that are out there, much like all the other media that's on the internet.
True.
Some you like, some you don't. Some you think that, hey, people are so much better than me.
Yeah.
What am I even doing here? So
Yeah.
how do you manage that?
Yeah, so I think the same thing which you told, right? Sometimes it's a good thing, which is definitely the case. Like sometimes it pushes you to push yourself beyond that. So recently, like when I had see a few of my peers designing a really great flow, I'll be like, wow, man, this is really cool. Could I have thought of this way? That level of detail, that level of craft. But at the same time, there are so many apps out there with fanciest of animations, all sorts of micro interactions, great photographs, everything. It is a world of information overload, and it is very natural for that to happen. So you kind of need to justify in a case that, like, if you want to implement some of that into your own work, is it the right time to do so? Because every product has a cycle of maturity, right? On day one, if you're doing 5 things and you're doing each of them poorly, then it doesn't make any sense. And you can't do all of them very well as well. So maybe try to get at the core first, try to fix that, and then grow from there one by one. But apart from that, I think one good other thing that I've seen is that a lot of people, like, let's say if you're working at a service-based company where you're working on service design, then you can't use a very fancy animation there, right? It's a product made for SaaS, for example, B2B products. Then how do you fulfill your creative ambition there? A good way to do so is to start a side project, right? Work with a few friends of yours where you're working on a social platform, you're working on something which is more Gen Z. Fulfill your creative ambition on something else than only your work. That could be an alternative.
Arun?
there's a classic imposter syndrome. यार मुझे कुछ भी नहीं आता. How the hell did they hire me? And I think I'm gonna get fired tomorrow. Very natural to have, first of all. I do empathize with you. And great that you kind of came up and asked this question. I'm 100% sure most of you have this question, but it's a very tricky spot to ask this question also, because you're fundamentally doubting yourself. Right? These questions are natural, first of all. Everyone has their fair share of it. Something that I tweeted recently also is I had my fair share. So early on, I used to go to Harshal, the co-founder of Razorpay, super close friend of mine. I'm like, Harshal, I don't know why you hired me. You know what? मुझे कुछ भी नहीं आता. मैं ये सब पहली बार कर रहा हूँ. Right? Also, taking the liberty to use Hindi, sorry for that. Harshal this one day got frustrated and said, हम भी startup पहली बार कर रहे हैं. A lot of times, you are in this weird zone of imposter syndrome primarily because you fundamentally feel that there's someone out there who's far better than you, who's well suited for this job that you're doing. Right? You're just being a fake imposter. This is again and then this is outside design also. अरे मुझे गाड़ी चलाना नहीं आता. Have you ever tried? अरे मुझे ये animation करना नहीं आता. Have you ever tried? So just forget these things. Just give some great thought to what you're doing. Make sure that what you are as of today is something that is far better than what you were, let's say, last year. Right? Put some self OKRs on yourself. See how you're personally growing. Could be anything, right? Like for me, growth at a point was salary. So for me, growth at a point was designation. These days, it's about how is my team growing? How are they efficient? How is my company's valuation growing? What other things apart from design am I doing? Right? So put some personal OKRs on, maybe give it a shot, put it for a quarter and see how you, the quarter two just started, like financial year, the quarter two started.
It's the right time.
Right time, put it up, see how you're different in September. Let's see what life has for you.
Right.
Put these thoughts aside here and stop comparing yourself with someone else. Compare yourself with you. Are you able to do better and faster designs? Are you able to take better and faster judgments or not? That itself is growth for you. And it's a very small community we have. So take advantage of that community as well. Talk to people. Over communicate again.
Everything boils down to that. I think from what I can gather, imposter syndrome comes from the fact that you are looking at yourself as another face in the crowd. Like Arun obviously and Aditya both of them said, I think it's very important for a person to understand that you cannot do everything at once. And you need to take everything one step at a time. And when you do that, you fundamentally do not have the time or the brain space to look at others and see what they're doing. Because you're so focused on doing what you want to do for yourself, be it one step at a time. Say you want to improve, say in terms of design, I'm going to noob things, okay, please. But say you want to improve your understanding of colors, you want to improve your understanding of shapes, you want to improve your understanding of what kind of design fits what scene. Now you cannot be expected to learn all of that at once, right? You cannot just get up one morning and say that, wow, I know all of this. Great, that's 3 steps ahead in my life. Let's move forward. You don't do that. You take every step one step. So I think that's something that's very important for all of us to learn, not just the designers in the house, or not just as designers, but as people, as human beings, as all the other roles that you play in the society. That it has to be done one step at a time. You cannot lift the burden of the weight of the world on your shoulders at once. I mean, even for that, you'll have to squat a lot, right? So I think that's another way that you can think about it and probably combat it up to a certain level. It might creep in at those times. I'd say sleep on it. Just go to sleep, forget everything else, and you'll be right as rain next morning.
So I'm probably going a little philosophical. It feels funny that I'm going philosophical. So a lot of times imposter syndrome comes because the question that you have is, will I be able to do it? Right? Will I be able to do it is a question of self-doubt. How will I be able to do it is a question of
growth mindset.
Yeah. Right. So just replace your questions there. Like the questions that you ask yourself are super important, and the tone in which that you ask are very important. This I've learned the hard way.
Akash?
I think there is a small video from Era Glass about taste talent gap. just go and watch it once. Every creative person go through this of imposter syndrome, or like for a very lifetime, even if you are a design manager or at a higher stage. Uh, your taste is at somewhere here and your talent is somewhere here, and this is the gap which frustrates us, that I'm not able to do this, because you're comparing yourself with the designer who is like 10, 12 years of experience or doing some great stuff. And that is when it comes in. I always say that just keep patience and keep practicing on your craft, and it will happen. And it happens, it really happens. Just be at it, just keep doing what you're doing, and grow every year, every month, and assess yourself. This is where that documentation and all those things comes into picture, that how you used to take decisions a year ago and how you're doing it now. So yeah, that helps. And most of the time this comes in early in your career, when you are like 3 or 4 years into your career. This happens a lot. It happened with me. I used to cut down myself, go out, do photography or something like that, come back refreshed, start again. So that also helps. But it's very obvious. It's not something. It's very normal. You're not going through anything different, or there is something wrong. It's absolutely normal. This is what happens, and it happened with all of us. So yeah.
One quick hack I think I'd love to share, since we've digressed into imposter syndrome, which is also a very great topic, is something called a brag dog. So brag dog is a very simple concept where, throughout the course of your career, there are multiple times when you'd be appreciated, like a nice flow that you've made, nicely defended a good argument in design. And as human beings, we are just creatures who just looks at imperfections more than perfections. We are just like that. We're engineered that way. If something is off, it is way more noticeable than if something is great. Because of that very fact, we often tend to give more emphasis on our lack of things than what we actually have. And at times, whenever you feel low or whenever you feel that self doubt, which Arun was talking about, the great idea is to look back at that dog and look at all the times when you've excelled. That will kind of reinforce that self belief that you have, that if you could do it then, why not you can do it tomorrow, right? You are the same person. You can absolutely take a good stab at it again.
Fantastic point. We have time for one more question. Anybody? Yep. Go for it.
So it's a short question and you don't need to explain. So one book, one app, and one movie that you will recommend.
One app, movie, and what's the
One
first
app, one book, and one movie
book?
that you will recommend.
Who shall we start with?
Megha. One app, one book, one movie.
Movie, I'm not sure.
Okay.
One book that design related, or like in general. Okay. Okay. Actually, I'll say design one only. The sprint I recently, not recently, it's been quite years back. Sprint book, the sprint that I learned, and and it immediately actually shift my design thinking to something else. There, the 5 days design sprint that I learned there. So that was the book that actually immediately changed my mindset too. So that's why I like that a lot. Other than that, there are many, but I have to name one. So I'll just skip this. App. I'm actually a little bit. I don't use app much, but yes, the very first app that I like is just thinking this to me.
Take your time. Take your time.
For designers, the very simple, minimal, I'll say this thing. What do you say? The Google my inbox. Gmail. That actually that's what I use a lot. So and it's very user friendly for me. So I use that a lot. Maybe you guys can answer.
Superhuman is a mail client that I absolutely love. Just made my mail flows far better. One is that. On the movie side, I don't have any particular movie as such, but I really like the concepts where you're challenging the status quo a lot. For example, the recent The Voice, the series, right, where superheroes go rogue.
Fantastic.
It's a very interesting take on how like you're used to seeing some things in a very normal linear way. So these things I absolutely love. On the book, I have many, uh, uh, but if you can, get your hands on elements of style, it's a very no bullshit book about how do you write and speak the right English. It's just beautiful. It's a very handy book. Like I'd in fact recommend everyone to just carry it in your pockets. It's that great book.
Is it that small?
Mm, Depends on how big of a pocket you have.
Okay.
Or get the ebook version.
Okay. What about you?
I'm a big movie fan, so I'm going to start with that. As I was saying earlier, Fight Club is my favorite movie, and it's also kind of on the similar theme. You do challenge the status quo that society follows. App-wise, I'd say Twitter, purely because that's the only social networking app I use. I don't use Instagram, LinkedIn, not at all. And
Once every 2 months.
sorry,
Once every 2 months.
once every 2 year more.
Every 2 years.
Because like I'd be probably active on LinkedIn when I want a job, like if I
Right.
want to switch a job.
Okay.
Other than that,
Glad you're honest about it.
No, my LinkedIn bio says please find me on Twitter. That's it. Like I'm not active here.
That's where you can find him, folks, on Twitter. Follow him.
And book. I was reading a book recently, which was about Buddhism. So it's called The Truths in Buddhism, which talks about a lot of Buddhist tenets. It's fundamentally challenging a few things in which we look at life. It's a very highly philosophical book, but it's a good refresher from the everyday stuff that we keep reading.
Akash?
I think the app which I like is Todoist, which is very well designed. I just love their design language and all. Book I recently read, Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. She's a world poker champion, and she have written about how to take decisions and how you detach your decision from the outcomes and all those things. It's very interesting read. Helps you to like how to take decisions professionally or in your life as well. Movie, I haven't watched anyone recently, but Hera Fairy, I'll just go and watch it like whenever I want to. Like that helps you.
Have a laugh while you're being serious about life, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I just go and watch movies which I like. I don't have to use my brain most of the time.
Great. Megha agrees. Megha's like, yeah, I don't want to use my brain when I watch movies. That's purely
That's for
entertainment.
entertainment. Oh,
Purely
what a-
Exactly, exactly.
All right, great. So, thank you for the questions as well. And I think it's time that we wrap up this panel discussion. So, folks, a big round of applause for our panelists today. We have spoken about a lot of things. We have been objective, we have been subjective, we have spoken about philosophy, but more importantly, we have all spoken about how we need to conduct this community that we are building. And I think that's the most important takeaway from this discussion. So, once again, thank you guys for joining me in conversation. Akash, thank you so much for joining us. And if you guys are all here, I'll take this moment to also just thank all of our viewers on YouTube for joining us for this event. Just love you guys help in closing this event for me. And because now we have reached towards the end of our event today, this meetup today, I want to thank all of you guys for taking out the time and spending it with us. I hope that you've had something to learn and something to take away with you today. And I think I hope that there has been a perspective shift. I mean, we've been talking to people who have been in this industry for long and have seen almost everything in it, right? And it's the best people that we can learn this stuff from. Once again, thank you so much for being with us today. Do follow us on all of our social media channels. Obviously, GeekyAnts, you'll be up to date with all the future events that we'll be doing. We'll have more people here. We'd love to see all of you guys back for all the meetups that we do. We do a lot of meetups based on tech, on design, on all the newest things that are in and out of the technology space. So once again, thank you. Big news is that we have pizza, beer, coke waiting for you guys outside. So it's time to splurge and not be ashamed of it at all.
I just saw Akash doing this.
You should have been here, Akash. You should have been here. That's what I told you.
You should have told me about pizza and beer, man. I should have lied down. Come on.
Next time, tell him about pizza and beer, please, when we are disclosing the agenda.
That wasn't mentioned in the agenda, by the way.
Swiggy it, Akash. Swiggy it. Join us.
We will do.
Okay. Anyway, so all of the refresh. Yes.
How about without a introduction? Everybody's sitting here so that if we meet there
We should absolutely do that, but I think we'll do that offline. So once they just close with everything, then we'll do it, right? So we will definitely do that. So anyway, refreshments are here. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for joining us today. To guys, everybody who's joined us online, thank you so much for spending your time with us, and we will definitely see you next time. Thanks a lot. Take care and good night. All right, before we end, I guess we are going off. Thank you, Akash. Thanks.